Okay, so let's start with a very bizarre press conference that Donald Trump gave, where he did all sorts of things that make very little sense. And what I want to point out about this press conference in particular is that Donald Trump seems barely conscious in this press conference. The bone white eyes in the middle of an orange face, his eyes half closed. He sounds like he's on Ambien or Downers, barely awake. And reminder, this is a clip of a press conference about COVID-19 and the death of a patient. And Trump is rambling incoherently about ISIS, slurring, sniffing, short of breath. Take a look and listen at this first clip from this bizarre press conference.
Again, it's been a long journey in Afghanistan in particular. It's been a very long journey. It's been a hard journey for everybody. We're very largely a law enforcement group, and that's not what our soldiers are all about. They're fighters. They're the greatest fighters in the world. As you know, we've destroyed in Syria and Iraq 100% of the ISIS caliphate, 100%. We have thousands of prisoners. We've killed ISIS fighters by the thousands.
The labored breathing combined with his barely awake voice and rambling about ISIS, it's all very weird. Then here's Trump strangely talking about the sacrifices that have been made in Afghanistan, and he comes apart talking about the expenditure of treasure, the expenditure of treasury in the fight. Again, what on earth is this guy talking about, seemingly somnambulant?
I guess most of all, I want to thank all of the people in the United States for having spent so much in terms of blood, in terms of treasure and treasury, the money that has been spent, the lives that have been lost. And we just signed an agreement that puts us in a position to get it done, bring us down to in the vicinity of 8,000 troops. The United Nations was informed of everything, and NATO has been great. Secretary Stoltenberg has been fantastic.
Again, the extremely slow speech, the labored breathing, the sniffing and not making one iota of sense. Then in comes Mike Pence, who is, remember, he's running this whole thing. We'll follow up on that component as well, and says travel is being banned to Iran, and watch Trump in the background seeming like he's struggling to stay awake.
The task force met this morning and brought the president a range of options, and at his direction, we will be doing the following. First, the president authorized action today to add additional travel restrictions on Iran. We will be using Section 212F, banning travel from Iran. Iran is also already under a travel ban, but we are expanding existing travel restrictions to include any foreign national who has visited Iran within the last 14 days.
And then a key moment, Donald Trump asked about, you've been referring to all of this as a hoax. Now someone has died. Do you stand by that? And Trump incomprehensibly says, no, what I meant was that the hoax is on them, on the Democrats with COVID-19. What?
I could just ask you said the other day in the cabinet room with African-American leaders, you've got to get away from politics. You were down in Charleston last night using the word hoax when talking about Democrats. Somebody now is dead from this. Do you regret that kind of talk?
No. Hoax referring to the action that they take to try and pin this on somebody because we've done such a good job. The hoax is on them. I'm not talking about what's happening here. I'm talking what they're doing. That's the hoax. That's just a continuation of the hoax, whether it's the impeachment hoax or the Russia hoax. This is what I'm talking about.
I challenge anyone to explain what Trump means here. When he called it a hoax, he meant the hoax is on the Democrats, but it's also being perpetrated by the Democrats. The Democrats are hoaxing and being hoaxed but COVID-19 itself is not the hoax. Imagine that. And then lastly here, back to the topic of Afghanistan, Trump in this part gets visibly confused. He says we never should have gone into Afghanistan under Obama. Of course, we went in before Barack Obama. Trump seems to realize it, immediately gets confused and says, actually, we should have gone in. It becomes a complete and total mess.
I could just follow up. You pride yourself on a deal maker, but your former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, has said that this is an Obama-style deal and sends the wrong message to ISIS and al-Qaeda. What did the Taliban give up here?
First of all,
will you be hosting the Taliban in Washington at Camp David, or will you meet them abroad?
We'll look at that. Look, nobody should be criticizing this deal after 19 years. He had his chance. He didn't do it. He was very much in favor of going in. We should have never gone in the first place. When they went into Iraq, listen. When they went into Iraq, when they went into the Middle East in such a fashion, I was very much against it. Shouldn't have gone in. He thought we should have. That's been proven wrong. I'm surprised that anybody would be against something where we try and end a 19-year war. We're 8,000 miles away from our home. We've done a great job in the sense that we've killed a lot of terrorists. We've put them out of commission.
So then he actually says, well, no, I don't mean it was bad for Obama to go into Afghanistan. I mean, Bush shouldn't have gone into Iraq. I was against it. That's a lie. Trump went on Howard Stern and said he was in favor. But this is actually all about Afghanistan anyway. So Obama's opinion or Trump's opinion about Bush's Iraq war, it has nothing to do with what Donald Trump is doing in Afghanistan. It is nonsensical rambling. I got an email over the weekend from someone who said, David, we see this guy as an ignorant clown, but a lot of his followers see this same press conference and they see strength and power and a guy who's not going to be manipulated by the libs. And that's probably true that a lot of Trumpists see this same press conference that way. And that's why we can't convince them to vote for someone other than Trump in November. We simply have to go around them. Donald Trump had a rally in the Super Tuesday state of North Carolina, and he went into a bizarre diatribe because of a potentially Mexican audience member. And in the video, you're going to see Donald Trump point to someone in the audience and start to say, he's Mexican. And then he says, but wait, are you Mexican? No way you're Mexican. You are? You aren't. No way that guy's Mexican. He's as Mexican as I am. It's genuinely hard to tell whether Donald Trump is shocked that there might really be a Mexican person at one of his rallies. Maybe it's a light-skinned Mexican, which Donald Trump might not know exists. Donald Trump not particularly familiar with Central and South America. I don't know what's going on here, but it is very, very weird.
Where do you live? Like this guy. He's a Mexican. You're about as Mexican as I am. Look at this guy. He's as Mexican as I am. Look at that hat. Are you Mexican? Are you Mexican? No, you're not. Are you? He is. It's like Elizabeth Warren. She said she was an Indian. I said, right? I said, I have more Indian blood in me than you have, and I have none. And she said, oh, this is terrible. So she went out and got a test, and it turned out not so good for her, right?
Extremely strange. And of course, has to throw in Elizabeth Warren Indian references as well. Can you guys believe that this is the world that we're in today, that this is what we're living in 2020? The president ranting and raving about a possibly Mexican audience member. Is it notable? This, of course, is upper Trump, as we discussed yesterday with psychiatrist Dr. Justin Frank. This reminds me of when Donald Trump spotted a black guy in the audience and started to yell about my African American. Remember this abortive rally from the campaign?
We had a case where we had an African American guy who was a fan of mine. Great fan, great guy. In fact, I want to find out what's going on with him. You know what look at my African American over here. Look at him. Are you the greatest? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, so we have an African American guy at one of the rallies a month ago.
This is sort of a concept for rally material. Trump used to just read poll numbers totally out of context at rallies. A new direction to go would be evaluate the perceived race and ethnicity of people in the crowd, maybe turn it into some kind of game show, because that's effectively what we're dealing with right now. And then, of course, we got to the moment in the rally when Donald Trump glitching this time specifically on the word banker. You'll hear it if you're watching. You'll also see that shoulder spasm that we discussed yesterday with psychiatrist Dr. Justin Frank. talked about that phenomenon that is often notable with Trump. Take a look.
So they don't have to go back to the evil banker or borrow money from the banker and lose the farm, lose the business. It won't happen. And I always say it because, I know a lot of parents.
Another day, another glitch. And then lastly, this is almost satirical at this point. Trump bragged about yesterday's, or the day before yesterday's large increase in the stock market, ignoring, of course, that it was an erratic rebound from last week's fastest 10% decline in the stock market in history, which Trump blamed on the Democratic debate. Then here is Trump taking credit for the erratic rebound day that the stock market had.
This is an incredible time for our nation. Our country is stronger than ever before. And today we just had the largest one-day increase in the stock market in history.
Imagine cheering for that. The fastest 10% decrease ever the week before. You get a partial rebound, followed, by the way, yesterday with another 1,000-point loss. And Trump has the crowd cheering about the one day in the interlude of erratic stock market insanity. And they're just cheering and absolutely loving it. And then, by the way, here's Trump yesterday. Yesterday, the stock market crashed again. Trump asked about it. He says, "Oh, no, I haven't seen the numbers."
I haven't seen it. I'm focused on this. The country's in great shape. The market's in great shape. I'm focused on this. This is very important.
What luck, right? Trump only has the availability and the time in his schedule to follow the stock market on days where the stock market is up. Amazing coincidence. So anyway, another Trump rally filled with what you would expect to hear from the senile guys that go to your local watering hole at 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, more so than what would be suited for a presidential rally and a president of the United States. This is where we are in 2020. The way the primary is going, we may be in this situation until January of 2025. As utterly insane as that sounds, Trump would be, 78 at that point in time? This is scary stuff. And I'm worried that that's the direction in which we are going. We've previously talked about Donald Trump's anti-vaccine tendencies, and some video from yesterday reveals that it actually seems Donald Trump doesn't even understand vaccinations. Trump had the summit with a bunch of different medical experts and pharmaceutical CEOs that are working on vaccines and treatments for the virus outbreak that we're currently dealing with. I have to refer to it that way to avoid being demonetized on YouTube. I'll tell you about that later this week, but we'll just call it the virus outbreak. And Dr. Leonard Schleifer from Regeneron Pharma is talking to Trump in this clip we're about to watch. And Trump is just asking the most uninformed questions that sound like what a first or second grader would ask the first time they're learning about how medicine and vaccinations work. Take a look.
This would be a combination of a vaccine, and also it will, put it in a different way, make you better quicker.
Yeah, well, think of it this way. If you get immunized with one of these vaccines, you're going to make some antibodies to protect you. We're going to already make those antibodies and give them to you so you don't have to go through that whole process.
Does anybody think that talking to Trump about antibodies is going to clear up his perspective on what it is that's going on? And then this is the big shocker. Trump starts to get the idea that the flu vaccine could be given to people to protect them from COVID-19, which is just shocking that a wealthy, educated 70-year-old man thinks that a vaccine for the flu would maybe work on this. And Trump has been going around for 2 weeks now comparing this to the flu. He knows that these are two different things, but he says, don't you think if we gave people a solid flu vaccine, maybe it would help people with, quote, corona? And the doctors in the room say, no, Mr. President, that would not work.
But the same vaccine could not work. You take a solid flu vaccine, you don't think that would have an impact or much of an impact on corona?
No.
Probably none.
Probably not.
So
What about the chickenpox vaccine? Maybe that would help deal with the corona. Guys, he thinks windmills cause cancer. Of course, he doesn't understand vaccines or anything else. And what this actually does is it sheds light onto his anti-vaccine tendencies. The anti-vaccine crowd, when Trump during the debates sort of placated the anti-vaccine movement with some of the things he said. The anti-vaccine movement actually thought, hey, maybe this guy is one of us. When Trump invited Bobby Kennedy Jr., an anti-vaccine advocate, vaccine skeptic, maybe better said, to Trump Tower during the transition period to talk about some vaccine commission or whatever. I don't even know that it ever got put together. The anti-vax crowd thought this guy may be one of us. It turns out Trump doesn't even really understand how vaccines ostensibly work. Never mind, does he have an understanding of the arguments made by the anti-vax community. He just has no idea. And it's just sort of like, sure, anti-vax, yeah, come and meet with me. And you can see the look on his face when you watch these videos. He's having trouble even remotely following the conversation that's taking place in the room. Never mind understanding what the president should understand in a situation like the one he's faced with. And when I saw this video, it's shocking and it's visually stunning to see a president so clueless and in so over his head. But at the same time, it's really demoralizing because this is a problem we're trying to deal with. And, you know, is Trump next going to suggest let's spray people with Lysol to either protect them or ourselves? It's actually worse than a dystopian reality because it's a flat out idiocracy. And as the numbers continue to get worse and the administration seems clueless, having a guy who prays about disease running the entire thing, having a guy who doesn't even understand vaccines meeting with pharmaceutical companies, I am not optimistic about the U.S. The White House's role in all of this. What I'm hoping for is that other countries, as well as agencies and organizations in the U.S. that are working relatively independent of the control of the White House, will be able to make some progress and make some things happen here. It was a completely vile weekend of disinformation and propaganda from the president. And he also had another one of these helicopter press conferences where he's yelling at the cameras while the helicopter whirs in the background. And this time he said, in his defense of his handling of COVID-19, he says, listen, a lot more people have died from the flu. At the time, he said no one had died yet. That changed just hours after this press conference. We'll get to that momentarily. But most bizarrely, Donald Trump claimed, as the helicopter whirred in the background, that the government is ordering elements of medical. Now, you might be saying, well, the elements of medical what, David? It sounds like there's a word missing there. No, just elements of medical. Take a look.
There's tremendous spirit, a lot of spirit. And as you know, with the flu, on average, we lose from 26,000 to 78,000 people a year, even more than that in some cases, some years. We haven't lost anybody yet, and hopefully we can keep that intact. There have been no deaths in the United States at all. A lot of that's attributable to the fact that we closed the border very early. Otherwise, it could be a different story. So we'll just keep doing a good job. We're ordering a lot of supplies. We're ordering a lot of elements that, frankly, we wouldn't be ordering unless it was something like this. But we're ordering a lot of different elements of medical. We are working on cures, and we're getting some very good results.
Does he mean elements like they're ordering elements from the periodic table, like cesium and barium that he thinks have medical uses? This is how you know, as if we didn't before, that Trump has no idea what's going on. We're ordering elements of medical. He might as well say we're ordering widgets and ding-dongs. It's communicating as much value and meaning. What he is saying is how much we would get if he said we're ordering ding-dongs. Elements of medical has about the same amount of meaning. And this guy is in so far over his head that it almost exceeds the English language's ability to describe it. It's blathering, it's lies, it's nonsense. Trump is almost existing in imagine a Venn diagram where you have Ronald Reagan's cognitive decline, which is not a joke. It's nothing to laugh at. It's horrible. George Bush's incompetence with the added element of Donald Trump's extreme weaponized narcissism. The Venn diagram of those three is where Donald Trump is operating. And lastly, by the way, if COVID-19 is overblown, trumped up by Dems, all under control, Why would Trump even be ordering so-called elements of medical that they wouldn't normally order? It doesn't really make sense for something that's perfectly under control to take action that is out of the ordinary. It probably doesn't matter. It's all merely uninformed propaganda. And then to close up this insane copter press conference before going to the next one, Trump also again was asked about the stock market implosion, and he keeps blaming it on Democrats instead of the growing global pandemic, which Trump is not particularly inspiring confidence on.
Go ahead. It's the worst week for the stocks since the financial crisis. It's more of an economic or public health crisis.
Well, I think it's just people don't know. It's the unknown. You know, they look at it and they say, how long will this last? I think they're not very happy with the Democrat candidates when they see them. I think that has an impact.
Yeah, world markets are crashing as the outbreak spreads, because people are just really upset with the Democratic candidates. It was a very gruesome Super Tuesday for the progressive movement in the United States. One of the things I do not do on this program, I will not do on this program, is give you unrealistic assessments of how things are going. And I told you yesterday, the momentum for Joe Biden from his overperforming in South Carolina, combined with the dropout and endorsements of Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, it is likely to propel Biden to better results than the polling reflects going in to yesterday's elections. And this indeed happened. It was a bad night for Bernie Sanders. It was about as good of a night as Joe Biden could have hoped to have, given where he was just a week ago. Even winning in Texas was Joe Biden, which he was not expected to win. So we're going to look at the results. We're going to look at how the results compared with the polls. We'll look at the delegate numbers. We'll analyze the path forward. But what is really important to understand, bigger picture about what's going on here, is that this has been a similar pattern in the last several Democratic primaries, where we're going to look at this tomorrow. In 2008 and in 2016, you have a situation where you have the polling at the beginning of the primary, and then things start to drastically shift, either two candidates getting very, very far apart, and then it reverses, or two candidates getting very, very close, and then it reverses. Look at 2008 and look at 2016 and look in 10 days at 2020, and you will see a very similar pattern. And again, being surprised when the same patterns repeat themselves means we're not paying attention. We are being adults here. We are going to deal with what is and not what we would like to be. Let's start with the results. There were 14 primaries yesterday, plus American Samoa. Joe Biden won 9 of the primaries. Bernie won 4. And they're still counting in Maine, which is very close. It's within a point right now. But with 24 delegates, the results there are only going to influence the total count to some degree. It's going to be, you know, a fraction, a marginal difference there. Joe Biden winning in Alabama, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Minnesota, Massachusetts, and Texas. Bernie Sanders winning Vermont, Colorado, Utah, and California, although the exact margin there is still being tallied. And then, as I mentioned, in Maine, the counting is still going on. Michael Bloomberg did pick up delegates. He is now in a third/fourth place in delegate numbers based on active candidates. We will discuss that. Elizabeth Warren did very poorly, performing at the 20% level only in her home state of Massachusetts, where she came in third place. And much like Michael Bloomberg, Warren clearly has no path to the nomination at this point in time. When she gets out is increasingly a topic of concern. Says she's fighting on to the following primaries based on a fundraising email that she sent, although at the same time, there is the idea that she is reevaluating the campaign, as is Michael Bloomberg. Let's now look at the delegate numbers. Every website has slightly different numbers on this, but as of right now, according to the Associated Press, the delegate count is Biden 453 and Bernie 382. That's a 71 delegate lead for Joe Biden. And we'll discuss in a moment why that is important. And then you see Warren and Michael Bloomberg, 50th and 44th place, 50 delegates and 44 delegates, respectively. One thing I was paying attention to that tells us a lot about momentum, and this is really entering the analysis of what's to come, because there are a lot of people saying this is over for Bernie, and there are a lot of people saying this is the beginning of the fight for Bernie, and there are a lot of delegates still out there, which is, of course, completely true. When we look at the polling and compare it to the results, if candidates do better than the polling, it's a signal that they're carrying pent-up momentum with them, including into future elections. And that's what we need to look at. And when we compare the results to the polling, what you see are good numbers for Joe Biden. Again, I'm just the messenger. If you look at many of these states, Joe Biden won by a larger margin than the polling. So as an example, in Alabama, Biden won by 47. He was projected to win by 25. Biden overperformed the polls by 22. Arkansas, Biden overperformed by 5. California, where Bernie won, Bernie underperformed by 3. In Colorado, where Bernie won, Bernie underperformed by 1. Massachusetts, Warren and Bernie were slated to win, one or the other. Biden won by 7, overperforming everything. If you look at, for example, Minnesota, Biden was supposed to lose by 5. He won by 9. That's a plus 14. And as you go down the list, you find that Biden overperformed basically every state and Bernie underperformed basically every state. Even Utah and Vermont, where Bernie won, underperformed the polls by 8 and by 12. So the numbers are not particularly good for Bernie Sanders. Sometimes when you look forward, you have to look at what regions are left to vote. So let's talk about that going forward. Yes, there are plenty of delegates out there. Yes, 71 delegates as a margin, Bernie Sanders could very easily overcome in just one night of voting. But the question is, where is it going to happen? And there are all sorts of hot takes about this. It's not over. Bernie's in it. And they're absolutely right. Bernie can win it. But the window closes unless we can figure out exactly where Bernie can win it. Because if you add up the momentum, meaning a lot of people saw Joe Biden's reversal yesterday, and I predict Biden's support will only grow from this point forward. 2, if you look at the remaining big states, they are not good states for Bernie Sanders. Example, Florida has Biden plus 22, and that's 219 delegates. That's a real problem for Bernie unless he reverses it. New York is going to be closer for sure. There's no recent polling, but it could be roughly a 3-way split between Biden and Bernie and Bloomberg. If Bloomberg gets out, Biden likely wins New York. But again, if it's a roughly even split, that helps Biden in the delegate math because it just maintains his lead. We look at Michigan. The latest poll in Michigan has Biden ahead. Georgia is a big one with 105 delegates, and Biden's been ahead there since day one. There's a question mark around Ohio. We don't have any recent polls there. And lastly, if Bloomberg does get out and Warren does not, he's reportedly reevaluating his campaign today. It's not clear what Biden is doing. If Bloomberg's out and Warren's in, that is even more support that's going to go from Bloomberg to Biden. And that could be the nail in Bernie's coffin. That's the way the numbers are looking right now. So I'm here to tell you, Bernie has a path, and it is a steep uphill path. And it's getting to be very similar to in 2016. And what I don't want to participate in are these completely out of this world hypotheticals where you had, I'm not even going to name the people. A lot of them don't even really have shows anymore. Their online presence has gone away anyway, so you wouldn't even recognize the names. But there were all sorts of people in 2016 when it was very clear that it was over for Bernie, insisting not only that Bernie had a shot, but that Bernie had the most likely shot. I'm not going to do that. This is bad for Bernie. He has a path. It depends on a reversal of momentum. It depends on changes happening in the dynamics for this race. This is always a tough situation. It happened in 2016 as well. When I can't in good faith come to you and tell you lies or blow smoke up your whatever, when I am not a campaign spokesperson, right? This is a well-orchestrated reversal by the Democratic Party. It took 96 hours to rocket Joe Biden into the position of now being the favorite to win this thing. And the important thing that I want to get into, because the numbers are the numbers, and I'm telling you what they are. The polls in upcoming states are what they are. What I want to talk about is, should this be considered a wake-up call to the progressive movement? And if so, what kind? And that's what I want to talk about next. MSNBC host Chris Matthews has had a terrible week or 10 days, and he has now abruptly quit on live television last night, claiming he's retiring to clear a path for the younger generation. Coincidentally, happening after two of the most embarrassing on-air fiascos of his career, combined with sexual assault, sexual harassment allegations. Let's first look at Chris Matthews quitting, then we'll look at what led up to it and discuss whether we believe his explanation. The explanation does reference the sexual harassment allegations against him.
Let me start with my headline tonight. I'm retiring. This is the last hardball on MSNBC, and obviously, this isn't for lack of interest in politics. As you can tell, I've loved every minute of my 20 years as host of Hardball. Every morning I read the papers, and I'm gung-ho to get to work. Not many people have had this privilege. I love working with my producers and the discussions we have over how to report the news. And I love having this connection with you, the good people who watch. I've learned who you are, bumping into you on the sidewalk or waiting at an airport and saying hello. You're like me. I hear it from your kids and grandchildren who say, my dad loves you, or my grandmother loves you, or my husband watched it till the end. Well, after a conversation with MSNBC, I decided tonight will be my last hardball. So let me tell you why. The younger generations out there are ready to take the reins. We see them in politics, in the media, in fighting for their causes. They are improving the workplace. We're talking here about better standards than we grew up with, fair standards. A lot of it has to do with how we talk to each other. Compliments on a woman's appearance that some men, including me, might have once incorrectly thought were okay. We're never okay. Not then and certainly not today. And for making such comments in the past, I'm sorry.
So he says it's time. There's a younger generation coming. Things are changing. It's my time. But he does reference those allegations against him from women of sexual harassment, and he does apologize for it. But there's more to this story, because the day that Jewish candidate Bernie Sanders won the Nevada caucus, Matthews said it was like the Nazis invading France. Take a look.
I'm reading last night about the fall of France in the summer of 1940, and the general, Renault, calls up Churchill and says, it's over. And Churchill said, how can it be? You got the greatest army in Europe. How can it be over? He said, it's over. So I had that suppressed feeling. I can't be as wild as Carville, but he is damn smart, and I think he's damn right on this one.
That led to calls for his resignation, and he apologized for saying that. Then this past weekend, Chris Matthews got black politicians mixed up, mistaking black Republican Senator Tim Scott for black Democratic challenger Jamie Harrison. And it was just as cringeworthy as you imagine.
Jamie, I see you standing next to the guy you're going to beat right there, maybe. Lindsey Graham.
Tim Scott.
Jamie?
Tim Scott.
Who's that?
That's Tim Scott.
I'm sorry. Oh, it's the other senator, Tim Scott. What am I saying? Big mistake. Mistaken identity, sir. Sorry. Tell me how you're going to beat Lindsey. Everybody knows Lindsey.
And then the cherry on top, yes, as Chris Matthews alluded to, comments to women that he has made, he did indeed get accused of sexual harassment this week as well. So Chris Matthews goes out quickly. There were countless calls for him to resign, and he is immediately retiring. Sort of practical question, who replaces him? We don't know. There are reports that MSNBC has been speaking to Shepard Smith, who left Fox News months ago, I guess. It can't have been a year, probably 6 months ago. I don't remember. Time is a weird thing in the Trump era. Shep Smith left Fox News after very public disagreements with other hosts and with the Trump propaganda machine. And there are discussions about, could Shep Smith maybe have a role to play in the future of MSNBC? So that's the story. Merely a quick update with so much going on today. It's Super Tuesday, so many other things. I don't want to dwell on this story much more now. But very quickly, after 3 very bad public incidents, 2 on air, 1 of sexual harassment allegations, Chris Matthews out at MSNBC. I don't think a lot of people in my audience are particularly torn up over Chris Matthews leaving. But if I am wrong, indeed, let me know. One of the great tragedies of the Trump administration is that almost everything, rather than mostly everything, is pure politics. It's just sport. It's wins and losses. It's blame and credit. And this applies as well to the cool virus dance party, as some people suggested we call it to avoid demonetization for talking about it. And Donald Trump is now blaming the Obama administration for the Trump administration's response to the virus. Check this out. One of the things that we've learned is that the U.S. is barely doing any testing for it. If you're not sick enough to have to be hospitalized in many cases, even if you're suspected of having it, having the symptoms, you often aren't tested. And the effect of this, of course, is that the reported number of cases in the United States is likely drastically understating the number of real cases. And if you don't get a positive test result and you actually do have it, you're more likely to go out in public, possibly infect others if you think you don't have it, than someone who knows that they have it and is more likely to go home and self-quarantine. Donald Trump is blaming the lack of testing on Barack Obama. Take a look at this.
I just want to add, if I might, and to go a little bit further, the Obama administration made a decision on testing that turned out to be very detrimental to what we're doing, and we undid that decision a few days ago so that the testing can take place in a much more accurate and rapid fashion. That was a decision we disagreed with. I don't think we would have made it, but for some reason it was made. But we've undone that decision. Also, when people come in from certain areas, we're doing checks not only at the site of takeoff, but at the site of landing. So when they land in our country, we'll also do that's if the planes are leaving from certain destinations.
So nobody in the room seemingly with any idea what Donald Trump is talking about. A decision Obama made and Trump undid it. So a reporter did the right thing and followed up and said, what rule are you talking about? What is this about Obama now? And Mike Pence, who's leading this entire fiasco, says, oh, yeah. FDA jurisdiction something.
Mr. President, you mentioned an Obama-era rule that you had changed regarding this virus. I didn't follow that.
Well, let's talk about it. Go ahead.
We could talk. Bob Redfield, you might speak about the last administration asserted FDA jurisdiction over testing and the development of tests like this. And Bob, the President changed that on Saturday so that now, as I spoke to several governors this morning, states now have the ability to actually conduct the coronavirus test in state labs, university laboratories.
Big difference.
And that's because of the change the president authorized.
Right. Because of Obama, states couldn't test, or is it they couldn't develop tests, or what? Laboratories, what is it? Universities? This is gaslighting. Donald Trump disbanded the pandemic response team. Donald Trump gutted funding to the CDC. Donald Trump resisted treating this seriously for weeks and if not months, and continues to do so. And as far as the claim about the FDA, an aide to Republican Senator Lamar Alexander said, the Obama administration didn't do anything. Obama proposed giving the FDA more oversight over some tests. It didn't go through. The truth that Donald Trump won't tell you is that his CDC made a mistake. They tried to create their own test instead of accepting the test that's been made available by the World Health Organization. The CDC test failed, and now we're in a situation where we don't even know how many cases we have. It almost takes some skill, some creativity, or at least some malignant narcissism to make this even somehow about Barack Obama. Blaming the last guy for debt or unemployment numbers, it's at least theoretically viable. Blaming the last guy 3 years into your presidency for your response to a pandemic threat would only work on, I guess, exactly the types of people who think Donald Trump is doing a great job. I would go further. Weren't the testing forms in Hillary's emails, which she bleached and acid washed off of her private server? Go even further. And meanwhile, they say, we don't want to politicize this the way Democrats are politicizing the virus. And while we're on this topic, don't forget how the anti-Obama people in 2014 were reacting to Obama's handling of Ebola, which of course ended up not becoming a global pandemic, and about which all conversation simply stopped the day after the 2014 midterms. Republicans would have had you think we had a domestic crisis on our hands in the United States, thanks to Barack Obama on Ebola. right up until the day of the 2014 midterms, at which point we barely heard a word about Ebola again. But they don't want what's going on now politicized by Democrats. It's pathetic, it's disgusting, and it's leading to more people being sick. This is not a joke. This is not, did I increase or decrease the deficit? This is life and death, and it's absolutely disgusting.